Today we read one of the greatest passages ever written about love. I highly doubt Paul spent a lot of time writing and rewriting this passage. He was writing a letter, after all, something he probably thought would be read once or twice and then maybe discarded. He knew that the Corinthians would probably read it aloud, either in a worship service or a congregational meeting, the way we might read a piece of correspondence in a meeting. And perhaps he anticipated that it might be passed around a little bit among the churches in the region around Corinth. But I doubt seriously that he thought he was writing something that would be part of the most influential book in human history, or that this letter, and especially this chapter, would become one of the most beloved passages in the whole Bible, which makes this chapter all the more impressive in its beauty and its power. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, April 2nd, 2022. At the risk of driving you crazy by repetition, 1 Corinthians 13 is part of a letter in which Paul addresses a variety of conflicts within that particular congregation. Then, in chapters 11 to 14, Paul addresses conflicts specifically surrounding worship, and particularly the place of speaking in tongues in worship. In all of this, he's attacking the kind of spiritual pride that made some people think themselves superior to their fellow church members. Paul understood that this feeling of superiority was a direct threat to the church's very existence and its witness. It had to be dealt with, and it had to be squashed. Paul uses a variety of methods to sway the Corinthians. In some places, he shames them. In other places, he debates them. But now in this chapter, he takes a different tack. He lays out a vision of a more excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. The middle section of this passage focuses on what love is and isn't, what it does and what it refrains from doing. But on either side of this middle part of the passage, Paul makes it clear how love relates to spiritual gifts, which is the real focus of his attention. I mentioned at the start of yesterday's devotional that there is irony that we read this passage so often during wedding ceremonies. We read it because its prose is so lovely and it seems sentimental. But Paul was being anything but sentimental here. He was being tough-minded. Most brides and grooms are not thinking about conflict in their marriages while they're making their vows, but as anyone who has been married for longer than about 5 minutes knows, conflict within marriage is inevitable. Maybe it's not so ironic, then, that we read this passage during weddings. Maybe it works there just as well as a sort of primer on what it takes to stay married for the long haul. But if we only read this passage at weddings, and we fail to read it during times of conflict in the church, we rob it of some of its power to reorient us away from our desire to prove our superiority and to subordinate our opinions and desires to the good of the whole. For that is what love is, and that is what love does. It elevates the interests and the well-being of others to the same level, or even in some cases, to a level above our own. No easy task in a me-oriented culture. When we return on Monday, Paul turns the discussion around full circle and applies his principles directly to the question of the place of speaking in tongues. But as we will see, his principles could apply to any conflict within the church, whether in worship or in any other realm. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.